I got my dad a brand new, custom-stitched Mercedes-AMG, luxurious blacked out, with a bespoke inside. The kind of car that turns heads even in downtown Dallas. It was almost as much as my annual salary at the time. Nonetheless, the car made little difference. It had to do with his approval, which I had fought tooth and nail for all my life. Maybe he'll pay attention to me this time, I rationalized myself. Maybe he will show his pride on this occasion. It was a mistake. Everything that followed from his words and deeds cut me so deeply that I was changed forever. But that wasn't even close to the twist. What makes it special? Held onto it in my purse throughout waiting patiently, encased in a folded white envelope. My entire life would come crashing down if my DNA test came back negative. Frank Carter. My father lied about me and wiped my memory in front of his many admirers, proving my worst fears were not a part of my childhood. In addition to a genetic truth, that package also included proof of a lifetime of emotional isolation. The car, the celebration, the speeches, and the toasts were all reduced to a single instant. My words once spoken could never be taken back. I stood up, locked eyes with him. As fragile as flowers breaking cycles is characterized by healing yoga and forgiveness. Ripping the truth with both hands is sometimes necessary to break a cycle, even if it means ruining the only family you've ever known. Be very careful if you have ever felt useless after giving someone your all. I am not the only one telling this story. It might be yours as well. Excuse me, call me Madeline Carter. As a 32-year-old, from the outside looking, in my life could seem perfect. A well-deserved walk-in closet views of the Chicago cityscape and a wine fridge are just a few of the perks of my downtown Chicago high-rise apartment. A perfect career path has been laid out for individuals working in the financial sector by me, chief investment strategist for a prominent national business. When it comes to boardrooms, I am the one in charge, not just the survivor. The title of my position is enough to make people stand up and take notice. Guys used to undervalue me because of the way I carried myself. A wage that in just 5 years enabled me to go from living on a friend's couch to my very own penthouse. But that was irrelevant when I went to my dad's place. Given Frank Carter's conviction that Innis nobody has ever doubted that I've been the tough one. We were the picture-perfect Kennedys of Texas, ultra-polished, ultra-powerful, when we were kids. My real estate magnate, Dad Frank, could turn dirt into millions with just a cold shoulder and the okay from the local authorities. My Southern belle mom, Evelyn, could keep a smile on her face, no matter how sharp the criticism at the dinner table. Finally, we had the kids. My older brother, Ethan, who was 3 years older than me, was the golden son, notable quarterback. Graduated from SMU with honors, he took over the Carter Development Group as soon as he got his diploma. Him being a legacy was a given. The spotlight really fell on my younger sister Lila. A whole 2 years have gone by, exceptionally polite, kind, and understated. She could quiet storms like no one else, avoiding danger by outwitting our father's vigilant guard. She had the power to ease tension at a dinner party with the mere use of a word and a little smile. Then there was only me. I questioned everything. I was the one who said no. Several people who were unhappy with the family business, the Dallas social circles, and the planned introductions to appropriate young men. Wharton accepted me. I ultimately decided to attend the University of Chicago for my undergraduate degree, because I've always believed that I needed space to figure out who I was. How does that option stack up? For what reason did I abandon the Carter plan? Since then, his ego and my independence have been at war. He called it treachery. For me, it was about staying safe. He ought to recognize a daughter who, with the help of scholarships, internships, side gigs, and even ramen nights, was able to pay for her own college education. I would have thought he would be impressed by her refusal to accept favors and her determination to climb the Wall Street ladder without bringing up the Carter name once. But no, my whole life all anyone has ever told me was to enjoy it while it lasts. Real estate builds wealth that survives recessions, or finance is just gambling in a suit. Guess they needed another diversity hire, he said, even though I had 2 promotions in a year. He appeared to be offended by every one of my accomplishments. With each step I took on my own, it was as if he perceived less of a Carter in me. Whatever the case may be, I kept at it. No matter the occasion, I always made sure to bring a pricey bottle of wine and a phony smile to our family gatherings. I was able to keep up behaviors like dressing modestly, behaving politely, and covering up exactly the appropriate amount. I was hoping that this time things would work out differently. Give it a hint, it was bound to fail. I did something that, looking back, looks almost melancholy, and my bonus eventually hit 6 figures on his 65th birthday. We have recently purchased a vehicle. This is no ordinary car. His ideal vehicle would be a matte black 2025 Mercedes AMG with school color embroidery on the interior, an automobile that was comparable to the one he would paint while puffing on his pipe at the country club gazebo, such that he would never buy anything for himself, but would take great pleasure in raving about to others. I bought it for reasons other than him. No, I don't believe so. Because a broken part of me really wanted him to see me. I bought it, to decide on my behalf. While he used the key fob to open the package, something briefly stared at him, something transient, very much like Instant pride. Thanks a lot. Regrettably, its duration was brief. Have you listened to what he replaced? Typical of him, right? This is excessive, Madeline. That is why are you debating over this? He made off with the keys. I stashed it away in the garage. About it, I remained silent. I neglected to convey my appreciation. The next night, while lying in my hotel room, I drank some wine and tried to tell myself it didn't make a difference while staring at the ceiling. Now that I mentioned it, I did. I had done a DNA test just for fun a few months earlier, and the expense was going to make my pocketbook burst. I didn't set out to find out. Honestly, I didn't. My initial interest in one of those genealogical kits was pure curiosity. Identify my Irish family tree. Make an idiotic family tree. On a Wednesday night, when I was taking a break from replying to client emails, I bought this bottle of Pinot Noir completely by accident. Nevertheless, after getting the results, there seems to be an issue, the one with Carter's art missing in action. Frank does not have any blood relatives. That was a mistake in my view. That gave me the willies. This is what sent me into a panic. I then took the test again. Now use real-life examples. I discovered a lock of hair from my dad's hairbrush after spending the weekend there. Presented to a private research facility, priority service comes at a higher price. In hindsight, the result seems clear. The end. I never knew Frank Carter as my biological father. If you were acquainted with our history, it would make much too much sense. Being cognizant of the fact, however, proof at my fingertips was a whole different story. It cast a new light on everything. Each heartless comment, every firing, every time he said something nice about Ethan, I felt like I had done a better job, more rapidly. Those with less expertise, more powerful. Because that made me wonder just one thing. I haven't been able to get any rest since then. Did he know about it? Did he always know? On top of that, under those circumstances, does that make sense to you as to why he was so hostile toward me when I was utilizing his name? At first, I thought about just staying quiet about it. Go to sleep, my love. On the nightstand in my hotel room, there were illuminated Mercedes keys, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from them. That was it. I knew I couldn't. Why I hoped that someone would finally put a bandage on me after 30 years of unrelenting torment. What is the next step? After that, I got a scalpel. For once, I made full use of it. The morning following the return of the Mercedes, I drove by my father's guarded estate while experiencing severe nerve pain and an upset stomach. I had a decent notion of what was ahead even before I came around the corner. Right at the start of the driveway, it stood tall and proud, showing off in the Texas heat like a piece of jewelry that a multi-billionaire owns just because. It had been taken from the garage by him. Make sure it's visible to all of your guests, every one of your commercial dealings. Attention, all neighbors. No, this isn't a holiday greeting card, not a single thing. Just positioning won't cut it. It was simply Frank Carter's style not to provide compliments. He was in charge of the presentation. Must I be lost? All anybody could talk about was me, in the situation. Nobody knew that the tension had been there the whole time. But it had changed into something else completely at this point. A more difficult assignment, something durable. At the tender age of 8, I was overjoyed to bring home my first honor roll trophy. Only a 96, he eventually said, after gazing at it for 3 seconds. The other 4 points were completely missing. When I was 15 years old, I won the National Debate Championship. He wanted to know if I remembered to be in shape for the live finals. In spite of his undying love for SMU, Dad shook my hand as though I were a business acquaintance, rather than his daughter upon my graduation as valedictorian from the University of Chicago. Frank Carter's go-to way of putting it, fixing things. Corrections were never meant to help you become a better person. They were meant to show off your authority. I will always be grateful for the chance to shadow a portfolio manager when I was an intern for the first time. I was crossing my fingers that he would at least compliment me and inquire about myself. His reaction was, "Are they seriously letting college students watch meetings now?" It appears like they're at a major impasse. He marked all of my accomplishments in life with an asterisk. What is the most ridiculous part? Doggedly, I continued. Just like an addict whose mind can't stop racing with thoughts of that one more kiss, even though it never actually occurred. It is believed that daughters inherit their father's personalities. Silence was my yoke. Sitting on the sidelines as important family business deals were made. Over dinner was a quiet murderer. I was admonished for pushing too hard, and Ethan was praised for simply showing up, so there was a silence in the air. Lila once explained to me, in her reassuring therapist voice, that our dad just doesn't know how to connect emotionally. It's a charming method of conveying his lack of interest. His public embrace of Ethan, enthusiastic applause, and celebration of Ethan's 30th birthday with the gift of his grandfather's Rolex are all reasons why I find this so compelling. Will you look at mine, A card for mementos? No damage has occurred to the CVS envelope. In that place, emotional distance did not exist. It was my intention to do it. Even after all that, the car was legally mine. I said yes when invited to attend his 65th birthday party, but I felt like a trained actress showing up to play the role of the submissive daughter. I reached out to Rebecca, my best friend from college, the night before the party in an effort to calm myself down. "Return the vehicle," was her command. "This man can't handle anything, not even a six-figure car. So listen up, Mads." I couldn't help but chuckle at that, but it was completely vacant, so I could see that she was right. I felt like I had finally won his devotion by appearing like the kind of daughter he could treasure, but that little girl still lived inside of me. I kept thinking that if I only tried anything different, expressiveness was spot on. It was always empty. Ethan and his wife showed up to the party 30 minutes late, acting as if they were famous. Frank was ecstatic. He embraced them, and he treated them like royalty. Lila was already there, and she did a fantastic job of mediating between the guests, the caterers, and the tablecloths. "Could you tell me who I am?" I stood at the edge of the foyer in a navy blue dress that I had carefully chosen. It was the kind of dress that made you feel deserving of a place at the head of the table without being stuffy or aggressive. Unfortunately, no one asked me to please have a seat. As I walked to the rear patio, I overheard a guest questioning my dad about the car. "Wall Street magic must be working. She's doing okay these days." He grumbled, his voice dry, as he remarked, "Madeline got it for me." They must have assumed I hadn't earned every penny for a decade, since I emitted a little giggle in response to his laughter. It was a sight to behold, and it was dishonor. He seemed to be taking pride in my abilities as a kind of thank you for bearing with me throughout our time together. He shot me a sidelong glance as I approached him. "Are you having fun at the party?" he asked while taking a sip of straight bourbon. I said absolutely, while seeing Ethan lean in to talk about a possible new development project. In his words, "You know real estate's still where the real power is." With that, my dad tossed me out of his sight. The equity markets are very individualized. The floor land will always be there. That wasn't all there was. It entailed dismissal, a declaration that the Carters still saw my career as an afterthought. I clenched my teeth so tightly that they ached. Sitting in the vast dining room that evening, surrounded by ancient mirrors that reflected every fake smile and oil pictures of deceased relatives, I felt like an audience member in a play I'd watched before. Someone offered a toast to Ethan. An admiral made a comment about Lila. My possessions include completely silent. "Good for you, your dad indicated that you're still working in finance," Uncle Raymond said with a smile as he leaned forward. "I bet it's exciting. Still, you feel the tension, don't you?" Frank grinned and joined in before I could respond. Madeline seems to be completely bewildered by the concept of developing anything citizenship prestige, whatever it may be. It wasn't even the words, it was the tone. How conceited. The inflexible belief that my accomplishments would never be enough to be considered a permanent legacy. Then I completely lost it, just inside. I'm not prepared for this just yet. Nevertheless, I sensed a deep-seated crack opening up within me, clear the area. My heart was racing, and I felt it in my ears as I steadied my hands to reach for my purse. Experience the mailer. The weight was heavy, barely perceptible, yet impossible to ignore, like the blade of truth that slashed through recollection. I glanced around the table at my mom, who hid her face whenever my dad made fun of me, my sister who loved me but did nothing to assist, and the man who had raised me in a phantom way. As he looked down on my brother, who received praises simply for existing. Stress had completely subsided. I had never heard of this family before. On the other hand, maybe I needed to finally recognize it for what it was. This does not include me. It was always doomed to fail. The question changed abruptly. How can I win his heart wasn't anything like that. The focus changed to what are the consequences of giving up. Is it the end? Yes, that purse. They wait for me. Dangerous fire, challenging, putting a challenge in my way so I can finally be honest. The meal served as the show, and those closest to me. Of course, they were just wonderful. The dining room looked like a corporate boardroom that pretended to be cozier, complete with a huge mahogany table that could seat 20 people but still seemed icy. Crystal ornaments, white porcelain, and the cost of the flower arrangements was more than my first apartment. Every little thing was given careful consideration. My father was right, I am too. Frank Carter was unfamiliar with chaos. He had trust in the image, authority, command, and structure. And what about this evening? Is it the supper? He had taken control of this territory. Across from Ethan in a completely unrelated seat. 4 seats away from the head, I could make out my name card. My Denver business partner and a second cousin I hadn't seen since high school were sitting next to me. Doing this was deliberate. He always carefully plotted out the seating arrangement as if it were a map of significance. Even so, my house. No word was lost in translation. His right-hand man, Ethan, was obviously making sure he was the firstborn. His and Rachel's offspring filed in behind him like members of a presidential family. Lila on his left stayed at the perfect distance to defer but close enough to whisper. Across the room, my mother Evelyn sat with a composed grin and a tight lip, giving off an aura of intrigue. Seated down, I breathed more calmly and fixed my clothes somewhat. Until now, I hadn't made up my mind to do it. At this time, I am not prepared. The envelope was in my clutch, sandwiched between a dusty lipstick and a compact that hadn't been opened since cocktail hour. A trigger, not just a result of the test, plus opening it would make reassembling the pieces an insurmountable process. Still, he managed to stand up after a while. With his jaw clenched and his voice as smooth as silk, he delivered a well-rehearsed speech. In my hand is a bourbon glass. Despite the muted baritone caused by the din of silverware, Frank began to speak, saying, "I would like to express my gratitude to each and every one of you for being here tonight." The thought of leaving a lasting legacy fills him with immense joy. Is this the family in question? If so, I take great pride in that. My fist clamped down on the tumbler of wine. Those days, a legacy lasts forever. His hand gestured to Ethan, who followed suit. My son has expanded the Carter development name beyond Dallas. His most recent Austin property features prime real estate and bold ambitions much like ours. Salutations and greetings. After giving Lila a firm squeeze, he looked at her. What an incredible lady. Lila is juggling her new job at the clinic, her volunteer work on the municipal board, and with her mom's aid, hosting family dinners. As Lila's face becomes red, the audience erupts in applause. Afterwards, complete quiet. A small break is in order. Everyone in the room appeared to be on the edge of their seat, since the fact that there was just one child left was common knowledge. But he left my name out. Instead, he made an even more scathing comment. And now about my middle child. Success may manifest in several forms. A small number of people are perpetually seeking promotion to a higher position, exalted review, figures computed using an electronic spreadsheet. Out came a few of shaky giggles. Immediately behind my eye, a pulsation coursed through a vein. As he raised his glass to his lips once again, he added, they call it ambition. But here in our family, we think that the key to success is not seeking approval from faraway towers, but rather from creating something that will endure. A toast was made, several individuals drank from it, except me, for the simple reason that it wasn't a salad, a missile it was. When it happened, I thought that was very clear. This was it. I struggled for my purse. My fingers slid across the paper as if it were a hot stove. Subtly removing it, I placed the envelope on the white tablecloth in front of me. The air was filled with the sounds of friendly conversation, lively laughter, and clinking cutlery close by. But I was somewhere else, among the quietness, spotless and pure. My soles sank to the earth. As they skidded back on the polished hardwood floor, my chair's legs emitted a little screech. All it took to get people's attention was a little noise. All communication ceased. Forks froze in mid-bite. Frank was also unable to complete his thinking. Without shaking or becoming angry, I held the envelope firmly. Problem solved. "Thank you for the speech, Dad," I said with a calm but insistent tone. "You seem to have a natural talent for leaving out details." He blinked, his gaze averted. Someone coughed. I continued maintaining my distance from the table. However, I had the idea that maybe we could incorporate some reality for once tonight. Keeping my gaze fixed on him the whole time, I set the envelope down in front of him. His brow furrowed. He didn't even reach out to touch it. At this time, I am not prepared. Regardless, he knew I'll admit it. Like everyone else at the table, I grinned as I got closer to myself. People who had seen me for years, as well as members of my extended family and business associates, would often attend these dinners. Each time he sneaked by me, unseen, as if it were painless. My voice remained steady as I went on. "I've spent my entire life trying to gain your approval. I was valedictorian of my senior class. My advancement was unrelated to the Carter name. I made something real and unique that I made, but it failed miserably each time." I shifted my attention back to Frank, for the simple reason that you always had an inkling that weren't you. Anxiety quickly permeated the room. My mom's fingers trembled slightly as it was placed near her water glass. Frank's expression stayed the same, but he clutched the arms of his chair even more tightly. I continued by saying that the envelope contained the test. I am not the biological son of my father, according to both of them. Genetic compatibility is actually two things, one that was made in a lab and another that is verified by a government database. A deluge of noise pierced through the stillness which did not bother anyone. Someone on the opposite side of the table gasped. Mother averted her gaze. It seemed like Ethan had swallowed some glass. I said, "I didn't mean for this to cause offense. I brought it up because I'm sick of acting and need a break. I'm sick of pretending to be someone I'm not every year, so I may satisfy the demands of someone who was never truly mine to satisfy." Frank locked eyes with me, his expression frozen in astonishment, and yet, in his perspective, seriously, never before fear. I nodded in silence. I am wishing Frank a very happy birthday. I then changed my direction. With composure, she walked away from the table, past the artwork, the marble buffet, and the speechless servers. While I was making my way down the hall, I heard a voice calling out to me. My dad isn't the one. Salam, Lila. Wait a second, Mads. But I didn't experience it that way. I stepped out of the home and into the warm Texas night. The air surrounding me is dense, but soothing like a mystery, with no explanation. The Mercedes was parked in the driveway, still shines. I still think he's the one. That, though, will not remain indefinitely. I had stashed the spare key somewhere. Before getting behind the wheel, I took one more look at the house, the well-crafted illusion of the Carter legacy, and then I pressed the ignition key. Purr, the engine let out. Opened were the gates. As I drove away, I didn't even look back. It had been 32 years since it had happened. Behind me, my father who raised me, yet who never loved me. Over there, truth be told. Regarding the road, finally, a moment of silence followed. As I approached the exit ramp off the expressway, I noticed that my phone had 9 missed calls. 2 of them were from Ethan, 1 was from Rachel, and 3 of them were from my mom. Of the aforementioned 8, I was certain that 3 belonged to Frank's lawyer. After then, the texts showed up. Madeline, you crossed a line that I cannot cross. This is not a family that will ever forgive you. Do you need someone to talk to? Sarah asked. You should not be on your own. I would want to speak with you alone, so please come back to the house. This is my mother's request. I didn't say anything. At this time, I am not prepared. That has nothing to do with my lack of motivation. I just couldn't pull it off. I pulled into a sleek, modern hotel in the city, the one with the money-scented pillows and glass elevators. The car was parked in the valet circle as if it were still mine, which on paper wasn't the case. But emotionally, it has never really belonged to you. I went inside and booked a room at the hotel, using the surname Keller, which was my first use of it in any other setting. I handed over my identification to the receptionist with the machine-like calmness she asked for. 15 minutes later, I found myself in the middle of a quiet 22nd floor apartment, staring out at the Dallas lights as if they might shed light on what had just transpired. It just couldn't be done. Light sources of enough intensity cannot reveal the flaws in a lie of this depth. In my family, there was an implosion happening right now. Where do I stand? Absolutely nothing. Rest easy. There is absolutely no need for alarm. Relatively empty. It wasn't until now that I understood the building had been burning for years. I stripped off the mask, the performance, and the tension by soaking in a long hot shower. Then I scrubbed until my skin chafed. I sat on the nightstand wrapped in my robe and let my phone ring itself to exhaustion. The number of unanswered calls today stands at 17. This is message number 28. The last 3 came from Lila. Lila, my dad made a mistake. In a way, I completely lost it. He opened the envelope in front of everyone, according to Lila. By the way, Lila wanted to know where you were. Kindly let me know that you are in a secure place. So far, I didn't say anything. This time, I didn't even need to say sorry. Oh, I totally thought that. If spoken directly to an individual, because you made me doubt my value for 32 years. So that love may be used as a scorecard. Why? Because I acted as if I had anything to give them in exchange for the dignity they showed me. In what position is Frank? Last but not least, Frank could feel the mirror reflecting his own image. That way he can see the real guy. When power is not available, an individual who is only a man, shouting about how out of one's hands it is. On top of that, I was unable to relate, in existence at all. Take note of their unfolding. Let them rot in the sludge that I didn't create, but had been hip-deep in since I was a doll, which is why I propose that they get in touch with the lawyers. They are able to get in touch with the therapists. Things should be called by their correct names. Reason being, I had ceased to play the role. I didn't need any explanations. Ethan must safeguard the dynasty. It is necessary to address the fact that Mom buried me like a landmine. The real estate magnate, empire builder, and Texan hero Frank Carter. need to figure out a way to spin a family conflict that he never thought I'd have the guts to share. He has incredible spinning skills. You could hear him speak. He has the choice to sue or not. Nonetheless, the damage was done. The truth was known by everybody. Where do I stand? I'm ready to be let free now. The following morning, when the sun pierced through the curtains, I experienced a weight I had never felt before, complete stillness. Being quiet is just one aspect of it, having no guilt. Having my acts not be explicated is a liberating feeling. I made myself a black coffee while standing barefoot at the window, staring out at the distant skyline of downtown Dallas. Life as normal permeated the air with its wide avenues and glass skyscrapers, but something had, indeed I am. My heart sank because the truth had finally broken through. I didn't feel like I was hiding something that someone else had planted. After seeing the name under probable biological father stunned me, I took out my laptop, logged into the private account, where I had stashed the results, and stared at it. You, Victor Morales. The age was 59. Mechanical engineer, California, San Diego. And that was pretty much it. Just a birth date, a college. A blurry picture appears in one of the yearbook's alumni publications. On a deeper level, though, I knew that I could survive with less. I felt that a polite, well-considered email would be the most appropriate means of communication. Greetings, esteemed sir. We were connected through a DNA test I had recently. Your reaction is not something I anticipated, and I understand that this would come as a surprise to you. I intend to avoid causing you any problem by being here, but I do have questions. I would very appreciate the opportunity to chat with you if that is at all feasible. Warm regards, a former employee of Carter named Madeline Keller. My signature is on yours indeed. As I lingered, 2 days subsequent to that, the reply came. Time flew by. Be very careful. Then again, nice. My darling, I needed some time to process your message after hearing it. I had no idea, not a single individual. It would be my greatest joy to meet with you. I am ready to discuss, but I am uncertain of the assistance I can offer. Next month, I will be attending an engineering conference in Chicago. Victor U. I just sat there reading that word over and over again for a whole minute. I appreciate it. I am unaware of anyone in the Carter family having ever made such a claim regarding our meeting. 2 weeks had passed. Then on a Thursday afternoon, when the aroma of rain and newly mopped pavement hung thick in the air, I stepped into a cafe near Millennium Park and beheld him. Greetings, Victor. Even though his hair was beginning to gray around the temples, he stood rigid and tight as I walked in. Even if it was only a partial recognition, he seemed to know who I was. Looking straight ahead, the jawline doesn't budge, and when I'm nervous, I always tilt to the left. Hugs were not exchanged. No one teared up. We just sat down, you know. And so it started. I had no idea your mom was expecting a child, he said, seeming completely engrossed in his coffee. We were romantically involved in college. Suddenly she broke it off. I was unpopular with her parents. At the time, I thought it was just another breakup. As I nodded in agreement, I said Frank was her spouse 2 months subsequent to that. He mentioned you didn't, he said with a frown. In theory, that's correct. Please describe him to me. He wanted to be in charge, and she hated it when others questioned her. So here's what we can say. Huge relief washed over Victor as he said that clarifies a great deal. After then, the ice shattered mysteriously. More over 2 hours passed as we spoke, regarding the subject of finances, pertaining to engineering as a profession. discussing preferred coffee orders, touching on politics, baseball, dogs, and the fact that, as previously said, he too is unable to withstand interruptions while working. There was no effort to substitute anything. We were just interested in seeing. Identifying where they should be put requires some effort. Those places, the anguish, those were the memories I told him about my upbringing. He avoided the limelight and made no promises. He only said, "I'm here now." On top of that, why, it was plenty for me. At the same moment when we were going to leave, he ceased touching his coat. "Your birth did not originate from someone else's suffering," he said with a compassionate expression on his face. "Rather, it was a real and transient event." Took a deep breath and choked. A DNA test cannot provide an accurate measure of such a reality. Strangers' automobiles and pointless items filled the bustling metropolis outside. However, inside, finally I felt it, I get it. Issue still exists, insufficiently flawless, totally accurate. I gave my permission to see my mom after spending 2 days with Victor. She had been texting almost daily in the hour after dinner, showing a growing amount of vulnerability with each message. The only thing that existed at first were attempts to shatter the silence. "I can tell you're hurting." The subsequent disintegration was as follows. It was never meant to reveal itself in that manner. "I need an opportunity to clarify things, please." I went to a tea room tucked down by the Chicago River to get away from it all. She came in first, Evelyn Carter, as poised, elegant, and graceful as ever. But this time it seemed heavy. Her hands trembled as she gingerly took hold of the teacup, and her pearls dangled just off-center. "I guess there's no way to make this conversation less horrible," she said quietly. "No, but first things first, the truth." She nodded after taking a long breath. I was subsequently told by her, Wellesley, Massachusetts, in reference to Victor, in reference to the period when she was utterly smitten with a Mexican-American man, whose parents disapproved of his intelligence, charisma, and bearing the Carter name. Her parents' reaction to hearing the news of her pregnancy was to demand that she stop dating. Frank consented to their marriage arrangement, but only on one condition. He would adopt the child and raise him as his own, completely ignoring their past. She whispered, "That was the deal." Her eyes welled up with tears as she said, "He promised to love you with all his heart. However, I worry that he was never genuinely competent to accomplish it. She had my whole attention. It was the first time she looked anything other than perfect. It was as though for the last 3 decades she had pretended that a decision she had taken at the age of 19 would have no bearing on her present situation. Something else struck me about her. Fear, sorry about that. Maybe one day love." "Why was it that you took so long to let me know?" I asked, speaking more softly than I meant to. Because I had expected Frank to convert. Admitting the truth was riskier than speaking the lie, and I was afraid of losing you, she choked out. As if our teacups held the answers, we both sat silently for a while, staring into them. Finally raising her voice, she said, "I failed you, Madeline. I was not a good mother and did not protect you from danger. Despite my knowledge that you would never settle down with a partner, I never stopped you from trying to find love. I want you to know that I am really sorry." My words failed to elicit a response, but I still reached out over the table. For the first time in my life as an adult, her arm was drawn back, certainly not in the part of the picture-perfect wife hostess and mother Evelyn Carter, but as my mother. For the first time ever, I gave her permission. Things you didn't know you needed can find a home in the space that clarity creates. When the smoke cleared and reality hit like a wrecking ball, I wasn't confused. I was ready. A buyer was found for my Mercedes. No, it isn't available online. After reaching out to a private buyer, I moved the money covertly to an account that was not associated with Carter. In addition, I was able to pull off an accomplishment that my family had not expected by utilizing that account. Consequently, I set up a fund for the sake of charity, because it doesn't make sense. For women such as new college grads, young professionals, and single moms who have spent their whole lives trying to fit in places that actively discourage them from doing so. It was called the Origin Fund, because you can choose your own path to success, even if you can't always change your family tree. A single transaction, like forming an LLC or sending money by wire transfer, changed everything. I shifted tactics while at work as well. I started to ask more profound questions. Once I stopped stressing out over finding a partner, what is the goal I am striving for? Is accomplishment meaningful when no one is around to be amazed by it? The stakes were so high that I declined 3 pitches in a row. There was no rhyme or reason for why I missed a week of work. Aiming only at improving my narrative abilities, I enrolled in a public speaking class, not with the goal of positioning myself better with clients. A gradual reflection of my identity began to emerge in my life. To fit in, I had created a false image of myself. This is not her. This version is different from the one that was created under pressure, guilt, and coercion. Please, Madeline. So what was the most surprising thing? I had Lila accompany me. At my front door, she showed up 1 month after the aftermath, having booked a hotel room, gotten 2 cups of coffee, and had a folder of notes. She smiled and said, "I would like to be included. More than just the money, yours truly, I mean." Over a bottle of cheap wine, we talked for hours about our common experiences with a hidden home, our quests for identity, and the power of forgiveness. She made no excuses. To put it plainly, she chose me, motivated by factors other than social obligation. Ignoring guilt, let out a giggle. Tears streamed down our faces. It was at that moment that we both felt fully equal to one another. Certainly not in the dual capacities of peacemaker and outcast. Nonetheless, we are rewriting history as women. Truth, say some, is the great equalizer. What comes next, though, is anybody's guess. They ignore the fact that there is no sound. About the strange feeling of having your worth recognized without your having to try or put on an act. For 32 years, I used a man's approval as my measure of value. I wanted him to be proud of my performance, my choices, and my accomplishments, so I shaped them accordingly. But right now, finally, it has clicked. I wasn't expecting there to be no applause. I could hear my own voice. Also, it was there the whole time. When you grow up believing in a family tale, and then you decide to reject it, it might hurt. This feels like a betrayal to me, in the same vein as falling behind. Like failure, truly, I feel liberated. Simply put, there will be moments when the most radical thing you can do is end your relationship with someone who has loved you for their own comfort. Absolutely not. That you, the one who gets in the way, who chooses a different path, and who refuses requests when they think they'll get a good answer that you... She has not disappointed me. She is a survivor. I used to think that pretending not to care about the hurt was what it meant to forgive. As I've grown older, I've realized that forgiving someone may help you choose peace over fighting. Having said that, it doesn't mean we should welcome back those who can't form connections. Essentially, it means that release me. In addition, I no longer feel the need to constantly demonstrate my value. What I've found, and maybe you should hear it too, is this. Not every facet of a family tree is based on genes. In many cases, you may feel most exposed with the people you actively seek out, as opposed to those you are born into. I could fall head over heels for you. Maybe you learned from your parents that love is conditional. Your sincerity rings true. It is essential for your freedom. It is not your responsibility to heal another person's wounds, especially if they turn them into a weapon. It is at your leisure to leave, regardless of the bond, in spite of the pain, assuming you aren't totally ignorant at the moment. What is true? That I told them is not anything I regret at all. Walking away was the right decision in the end. That little girl who sat through meal after meal thinking about how she could get love. She finally got what she wanted. Nothing to do with Frank. This does not reflect Evelyn's stance. Victor was also unable to assist, with the exception of my case. Anyone who has ever felt completely unnoticed when seated at a table can relate. If the sound of your own heartbeat races while you listen, take note. You are not alone. By the way, what is your net worth? There was never any wiggle room.